Great, so welcome everyone to the first event of day 2 at the Vital Sites for a Protected Planet Pavilion here at the IUCN World Conservation Congress. Today's session has experts joining us from the Pacific region for an event from knowledge to action for protected and conserved areas in the Pacific.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning from Marseille and from the Protected Planet Pavilion. Welcome, everybody. Welcome those of you who made time to attend this session from knowledge to action for protected areas in the Pacific. My name is Lolita Gibbons, the Arong. I am from Palau. I work for Palau Conservation Society. This session this morning will highlight the approach and successes for the regional implementation of biodiversity and protected areas management program, or BIOPAMA, in the Pacific region. Unfortunately, due to the travel restrictions associated with most of the presenters, they will be joining us virtually from the various 4 corners of the planet. We are very lucky, however, that Christelle Pratt, Assistant Secretary General with the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, is with us today, and we'll start the proceedings by saying a few words. Christelle?
Do I need it? Yes. And do I need to hold this? Can I put this down? Good morning, good day, and good evening to all of you who are joining us at this important event. And so on behalf of the Organisation of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, or the OACPS as we are known, I'm pleased to provide brief general remarks at this important side event organised by the BIOPAMA program. From knowledge to action for protected areas in the Pacific. And like many here and joining us online today, to listen to some of the success stories from the Blue Pacific continent in capacity building on management effective tools for protected and conserved areas, as the Pacific has and remains a trailblazer in offering the conservation community lessons on how to empower Indigenous peoples and local communities to manage their natural resources, to achieve biodiversity and social outcomes. It is the birthplace of the locally marine managed areas, LMMA concept, that has since spread to other parts of the world and continues to be strong, vibrant and active, a network in the Pacific. Equally, large marine protected areas make a disproportionate contribution to global conservation efforts. And importantly, area-based management, use and conservation in the region continues to evolve the Pacific way. I wish to share just a few points before we get to those more interesting and colourful events today. First, to acknowledge the long relationship and partnership that we, members and regions of the OACPS, have enjoyed with the European Union, and recognise with appreciation their ongoing support and investment under the 11th EDF, intra-ACP cooperation, to build capacity for climate action and biodiversity conservation. A total of €513 million was earmarked for climate change and biodiversity conservation initiatives, and 258 million of this has been programmed for biodiversity. Today we have 8 programs that are being implemented to support biodiversity conservation to the OACPS, and BIOPAMA is a key part of this program portfolio. The OACPS looks forward to the successful implementation of these programs that will not only build and or strengthen the capacity of the beneficiary countries and communities to conserve and sustainably manage and use the rich biodiversity they have, but also to provide powerful lessons learned and facilitate the exchange of these within and between the 6 regions of the OACPS. We stand ready to provide coordinated support to our 79 member states to ensure that the success stories from the ongoing programs are available to other countries and regions to strengthen their capacities as appropriate. Secondly, I wanted to highlight that at its 112th session held in July this year, the OACPS Council of Ministers adopted an important resolution on biodiversity as preparation for COP15, and to also share a few excerpts from that resolution. Ministers called for the responsible and effective management of 100% of coastal and marine biodiversity to ensure ocean health, productivity, and resilience based on the best available scientific information and traditional knowledge. Ministers also underlined the need to redouble our efforts to ensure that aquatic resources are managed and harvested sustainably, and acknowledge area-based management, including marine protected areas, as critical to reverse biodiversity loss. The OACPS therefore acknowledges the critical capacity development efforts of the BIOPAMA program, especially in addressing the unique needs and vulnerabilities of members of the OACPS, including the 38 small island developing states that are the most vulnerable to species and habitat loss. In closing, we would like to emphasise the need to scale up the successful program interventions and innovations from the Pacific to other areas within members and regions of the OACPS and elsewhere, so as to improve biodiversity conservation across the blue planet. Pacific peoples are diverse, yet they share a common identity and geography, where nature and culture are inseparable and where biodiversity conservation has and should be implemented through this lens. As much as Pacific peoples are open to adaptive learning, we must acknowledge that they also have much to offer. Thank you, Lolita.
Thank you very much, Christelle. Next, we will have Paul van Nimwegen from Fiji joining us, and Paul will highlight the regional implementation approach and impacts of the project. Paul will also provide a summary of the state of protected and conservation areas in the region. So, Paul?
Paul, you're still on mute. We can't hear you.
All right, thanks, Ruchir. Thanks, Lolita. Thanks, Christelle, for the introduction. As some of you will know there, I am the Protected and Conserved Areas Program Coordinator with IUCN Oceania. I am also the Pacific BIOPAMA Regional Coordinator. I'm really happy today to be able to present you our work. So what I'll be doing in my part of the session is that I would like to basically set the scene by firstly giving you a snapshot of the project's implementation and impact. I'd also like to highlight some of the major findings, the major findings of the Protected and Conserved Areas report, the draft one that we're currently working on at the moment. So let's jump into it. All right, BIOPAMA. So BIOPAMA, or the Biodiversity and Protected Areas Management Project, as Christelle touched on, is an initiative of the African, Caribbean and Pacific group of states financed by the European Union 11th Development Fund. This is a 60 million euro 6-year project there's a partnership between IUCN and also the European Commission Joint Research Centre. As you can read, the mission of the project is to enhance the outcomes, biodiversity outcomes and social outcomes from protected areas, protected and conserved areas across those 79 ACP countries, including the Pacific. To do this, the project conceptually implements activities in 4 components. So the first component is setting up regional resource hubs, regional support hubs for protected areas. The second one is the design and adaptation of diagnostic tools. The third one is providing funding direct to on-ground action through a 21 million euro grant mechanism. So drilling down to the Pacific now, the project's implementing partners in the Pacific region are IUCN Oceania, where I'm from. It's also the Secretariat for the Pacific Environment Program, Regional Environment Program, or SPREP. And the third one is the European Commission Joint Research Centre. As you will see on the map on the screen, the project in this region, the Pacific region, covers the 15 Pacific independent states and Timor-Leste, which this area encompasses an extraordinary diversity of cultures and peoples. It also has some of the most significant areas for biodiversity on the planet. Aligned to the overall project framework, the regional partners are implementing a series of elements and activities to achieve the project's outcomes. These are firstly the establishment of the Protected Area Support Hub at SPREP. The other activities that through their Protected Area program, the other activities that we're doing is data collection and analysis, the application of diagnostic tools, capacity building, technical reports, the grant mechanism supporting the implementation of the grant mechanism in the region, and also decision-making support. So I want to now move to the impact of the project. So as I said, it's a 6-year project. It's been running now for 3.5 years. So first of all, I want to focus on the impact of the Protected Area Support Hub, or SPREP. Vi, after me, will talk in much more detail about the activities of the support hub and their achievements and some of the outcomes and that sort of thing. For now, I just wanted to highlight some overarching achievements of Vi and the team at SPREP. So first of all, the team has been able to update the protected area data for 70% of the countries within the region. Second, they've directly supported the development of 21 national policies. And beyond this, they've supported numerous more through the tools, the services, and the information on the what's called the Pacific Islands Protected Area Portal, or PIPA, which is actually the interface of the support hub. That particular portal, in the last 3.5 years, has had over 100,000 users from all of the countries the project covers in the Pacific, and over 240,000 sessions. Interestingly, there are 5 countries where more than 1% of the population has used the portal. Next, I wanted to examine or focus on the grant mechanism. So in the Pacific, we have awarded 16 grants in 19 countries, worth nearly $2 million US. This has benefited over 175 protected areas in the region. Ananta, later on in this session, will give us some more information about the grant mechanism, the sites, the types of activities that are being funded. Right, so the last impact area that I'd like to focus on is training and diagnostic tool. Christelle highlighted the importance of training as part of the project. The regional team and partners has trained over 300 protected area practitioners from 14 countries, 14 of the 15 countries. This is in tools and services, such as collecting spatial data in the field, using geographic information systems, applying the spatial monitoring and reporting tool, the application of other effective conservation, area-based conservation measures or OECMs, conducting evaluations with the management effectiveness tracking tool. This training, along with direct support from the team, has seen that there are over 10% of the protected areas in the region that have adopted the governance and management evaluation tools that are being offered through the project. All right, I wanted to now move on to the last part of my presentation, which is really highlighting some of the key findings from our draft State of Protected and Conserved Areas report. This process has brought together over nearly 20 regional and international experts to produce the first comprehensive review of the status and issues of protected areas in the region. It's going to be launched in the first quarter of next year. It's going to be launched in the first quarter of next year. This is part of a series of knowledge products that the region is producing. Claudia, later on in the session, will talk about the ecosystems work that we've been doing in Timor-Leste. Some of the other knowledge products that we'll be focusing on in the future is the application of OECMs and also the contribution that protected areas in the region make to nature-based solutions. Right, so the first finding that I wanted to focus on was around coverage. So as you can read on the screen, roughly 20% or just below 20% of the countries within the region's EEZs on the marine side are within marine protected areas. On the terrestrial side, this figure is much lower. It's 6%, which is actually considerably lower than the global figure, which sits at about 16% with OECMs. I guess there's a couple of other key findings around coverage. The second one is that the coverage varies greatly across the region. So you have some countries like Palau, where Lolita's from, that 100% of their marine area is in MPAs, whereas you have other countries where that figure is 0. Lastly, in terms of trends, the coverage of terrestrial protected areas has remained largely stagnant for the last 10 years, only making a nominal increase, whereas on the marine side, the designation of large-scale marine protected areas has seen that, I guess, percentage of the EEZs increase dramatically, particularly over the last 5 years. All right, next, governance. As Christelle touched on this earlier, the major finding that we found through this process is that 53% of the recorded protected areas in the ACP countries of the region are either community-based or Indigenous managed. This constitutes nearly 25% of these recorded areas on the planet, which I think is a really, really important finding, that a quarter of community-based and Indigenous managed areas are within the Pacific region. All right, so moving along to areas important for biodiversity. So with this one, what we used as the measure of the indicator was key biodiversity areas, or KBAs. I assume that most of you do know them. So what we found is that 8% of the MAT KBAs are fully protected. They're the green dots on the screen on the map. 22% are partially protected. They're the amber dots. And then lastly, the red dots, 70% of KBAs are not included in any protected area. This figure, the 70% figure, is about double that of the global figure. All right, now representativeness. The key finding here is that that the coverage or protection of or the area within each ecoregion and pelagic province that's within protected areas varies greatly. It really depends, but is just generally low across that. All right, lastly, focusing on management effectiveness. The key finding here was that 18% of protected areas within the region have been assessed by a management effectiveness by a protected area management effectiveness tool. This is pretty low compared to other regions in the world. Again, as with many of the other indicators, it varies greatly within the region. So you have some countries like the Federated States of Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, which have assessed 100% of their protected areas. But then you've got other countries where they haven't assessed any of their protected areas. So that brings my presentation to a close. I wanted to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to pass the floor back to Lolita now. Thank you.
All that was, I can hear myself. That was very informative. I now would like to ask that our colleague from Samoa, Vi Junklut, will join us to bring, he will then take over, turning our attention to the Regional Protected Areas Resource and Data Hub. I think Paul sort of mentioned that in his presentation. This is being hosted by the Secretariat of the SPREP, or South Pacific Regional Environment Program. So Vi, over to you.
Thank you, Lolita. Thank you, Paul. And good morning, good evening to wherever you're tuning in from as we move forward with this session. Yes, my presentation this morning or this evening, depending on where you're clocking in from, we'll be looking at the SPREP, or Protected Area Program of Support, which is hosted by the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, or SPREP, which has taken on the role of the regional BIOPAMA of the Pacific, or otherwise known as the Pacific Protected Area Decision Support Hub. Before I go any further, I just want to give a little bit of background about SPREP, because I think it's important to set the scene in this case. So SPREP is a treaty organization, or an intergovernmental organization based in PSR, smack dab in the middle of the Pacific. We have about 26 country members, which can be broken down into 21 island member countries and territories, as well as 5 metropolitan member countries, including Australia, France, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the USA. We have a number of wide-ranging partnerships and extensive networks that help us to effectively carry out our work in the region, both at the country level, across the region, and also internationally. So as I mentioned, SPREP has taken on the role, or has implemented the role as the Pacific BIOPAMA Regional Observatory for the last 7 years, since 2014. And just to give you a snapshot of the organization and its growth, back in July 2019, we had just over 100 staff. But as of last month, we have 143. So it's just to give you an idea that the organization is continuing to grow in relation to the demand from our members in terms of the services that we need to provide to them. For more information, you can go onto our website at www.sprep.org. Unfortunately, our annual report for last year is not available yet, because we have our annual SPREP meeting this week, where we will be adopting the report for last year. But the 2019 report is available on our website at the moment, and the annual report for last year will be available from the middle of this month. So in terms of SPREP PA, or SPREP's Regional Protected Area Support Program, it's a culmination or a combination of all, it's a sum of all the protected area technical and advisory support that we've been providing for our member countries over the years. It's being supported by the EU OACPS BIOPAMA Phase 2 project, and it's focusing on delivering specific services to the region to implement protected area priorities and commitments through, among other things, partnerships, coordination, and networking. SPREP is coordinating the Pacific Islands Roundtable for Nature Conservation for the region, which is a consortium of regional partners and national governments working on nature conservation. So it's just a way of trying to coordinate our efforts to implement national implementation of national biodiversity strategies, as well as looking at making sure there's no duplication or overlap in the work that we're doing on protected areas and nature conservation around the region, but rather looking for synergies and further partnerships through the support program. Yeah, carrying on, I think my connection got a bit choppy there. Can somebody confirm if you can still hear me or see me? Hello?
Yes, we can still see and
Yes,
hear
thanks,
you.
Fire. We can still hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I dropped off there, but just to move on, I just wanted to say that, yeah, under the Protected Area Support Program, we have a number of partnerships and memoranda of understanding with a number of key partners that work in the region, both internationally, but focusing on protected areas. So there's a lot of ways in which we can build on what one another is doing in support, and also to see that those benefits do make it down to our member countries. And most importantly, SPREP and its regional partners to have oversight of the regional framework for nature conservation in protected areas, of which we have the latest version, which is in the almost it's in the final stages of being adopted for publication and the current version that we have now is for the period 2021 to 2025. In terms of strategic communications, awareness, and advocacy, you can see that we have put out over the years quite a number of different ways and means of promoting protected areas in terms of tools, guidance, general awareness, and also advice to our member countries. A lot of work on information sharing and exchange, primarily through the regional RIS, or the Pacific Islands Protected Area Portal, and also looking at dissemination of protected area management tools and guidance to inform national decision-making and planning within the countries. We've recently completed some trainings and assistance to help countries to embark on a process for better reporting to the global level in terms of on the WDPA and also the Global Database on Protected Area Management Effectiveness. And most recently, we've completed a training for the region to introduce the concept of OECMs and look at the potential sites across the region. With one of the objectives is also to provide that connect between the region and the global level in terms of reporting to the World Database on OECMs. We also provide support under the program for MEA preparations for our countries, as well as real-time negotiations. Recently also participated in the CBD OEWG last week and provided that support for the countries. Of course, there's also training on the regional RIS, which we're continuing to have been continuing to roll out over the last 3.5 years. We do have some training coming up, which is looking basically at how to navigate the portal and find information easily that could help countries with information that would inform decision and planning. We've also been carrying out training on open source software, very important. So we've been promoting the use of it's good and it's easy to we have people who are quite well versed within our reach in order to deliver that training for countries in order to develop basic maps and field capture and out in the field. The main mode of delivery where we have been delivering support is through direct technical assistance, and that's the way SPREP has always done it. In this case, the program of support has been providing that direct technical assistance to Pacific ACP countries, although supported by the regional RIS in terms of information resources and guidance that it also houses and associated tools and guidance through the BIOPAMA program. The Pacific Island Protected Report itself was launched at the World Parks Congress in 2014. Because of time constraints, I won't go into much detail on its genesis, but suffices to say that it's a product of regional priorities and necessity for information sharing and networking of protected areas. And as I mentioned before, we've had a lot of support through BIOPAMA assistance for the development of features and upgrades to the portal, which I am very thankful for. Basically, the vision just touches on providing opportunities and ways and means of connecting protected area practitioners across the region. So in a nutshell, this reflects the role of SPREP as the regional protected area decision-making hub, providing decision support, analytical services, and capacity building to the wider region. I won't go into detail as well in this flow chart here, but this just gives you an idea of the regional environmental data infrastructure and where the regional RIS SPREP sits in the whole, in the totality of this. But just to say that it's playing an important role in informing and supporting those national reporting commitments, as well as reporting to regional frameworks, and up to the global protected area planet mechanisms. So I won't go into this very much because I know that Paul has already touched on it. But what I will do now is just provide you with a very brief demo of the portal in the time that I have available. Okay. So this is the landing page of the portal, and this is actually a slideshow which gives you an idea of has a snapshot of different protected areas across the region, a little bit of a description, and you can click on read more if you want to find out more about that particular protected area. Then we have the map interface here where you can browse protected areas by country. We have a Pacific dashboard, so users can see up front, in terms of marine, terrestrial, and the total amount of protected areas across the region. You can have that information if you need it at your fingertips, if that's something that you need, to see. I think it's quite useful for users. Then we have our protected area management tool section, where you can just click directly on either of these, and it'll take you either to the page where you can download that tool, or it'll be a direct download of the tool, so you can have it with you for use. This is our browse resource information, browse information resources area, and this particular it rotates. So every time you refresh the page, something else will be on the front lineup. I mean, the different thematic areas will be, it keeps on changing up. So it doesn't stay on one topic. Then we have our latest news, which is updated on a weekly basis. In our What's New section, these are any related science or any new technical papers or research that are relevant to protected areas that are well, mostly open access papers that people can draw upon. Then at the bottom, we have a calendar events, which is also updated regularly. Just to give you a snapshot of how viewing protected area data, this is for example, if you go here to the Solomon Islands, you can click on the Solomon Islands map there. And if the connection holds up, hopefully we can get to the Solomon Islands page quickly. Okay, and up front you can see the protected area count, and also some stats on management effectiveness assessments, the total amount of area per marine and terrestrial that's been covered, the designations that are included in the WDPA information, as well as the governance types. Then you also have the opportunity to download maps of each of the provinces, as well as the national level map, and download the National Biodiversity Strategy. Some important other important links to country. That's also important to country profile for Solomon Islands. Then you have another interactive map here, which when you and then you have your protected area list, which you can download at the bottom. There's a link down here where you can download it as a CSV, and then that'll download to your laptop if you want to have the information on your yeah. So and then for each of these, if you want to go in further, you can click on a specific conservation area, and it'll take you directly there on the map. So, and a little bit of information about the site itself. Okay, I'm not going to go in the interest of time. I'm not going to go into any further demo on the portal, but if you do have time, it'd be great if you would like to learn more about it, that you can go on and familiarize with you know, the different areas, the menus or submenus, depending on the type of information that you're trying to find. To wrap up, because BIOPAMA is coming to an end in mid-2023, it's very important that we sustain the functions of the regional observatory at SPREP, and make sure that we maintain those services beyond the program or the project. So we are developing a sustainability plan to maintain these services beyond that point. And we are planning to submit that for endorsement at the SPREP Executive Board meeting next year. Again, SPREP endorsement of this plan demonstrates institutional commitment and buy-in to maintain the functions, the BIOPAMA functions and services well into the future. We will continue to maintain and upgrade and make improvements to the regional reference information system based on user needs and regional priorities. We will continue also with our GIS technical support. As I mentioned, we've been rolling out a lot of training on QGIS, site mapping, producing map products as requested by our members, and also conducting analysis of regional indicators. We will continue training on the PIP and its basic use and navigation to assist planning and decision making. Also training in the tools that we have available to us, the program, as well as others that are continuing to be developed and enhanced. Continue also to facilitate country data reviews. As Paul mentioned, we for countries on OECMs as well as PAMI data. Awareness, strategic communications will continue. And as Paul mentioned, RC Islands report will be looking to integrate the results of that and visualize those through the regional RIS within the next couple of months or early next year. And another quick point is that we know that the new global biodiversity framework to 2030 is now in motion, and especially with regards to Target 3, we'll be looking to align the regional risk to best support the Pacific ACP countries to meet that target in the coming years. So thank you very much. That's nothing for, anything further from me. Happy to answer any questions if time permits.
Thank you very much, Vi. I certainly hope that we will be able to sustain the services and the tools and continue the development of the tools with your program, especially with PIPAP. I know I certainly appreciate those tools. I've used them and I get the newsletters every week, so thank you. Now we will then focus in at the country level, where Claudia Capitani from the European Commission Joint Research Center will share some interesting work that has been happening through a national partnership with Timor-Leste. This has been, which was seen, has seen the ecosystem services provided by the protected areas in country being evaluated. So thank you, Claudia, for joining us.
I'm gonna talk you about ecosystem service assessment in Timor-Leste, stakeholders' perception versus models-derived values. I'm a scientific officer at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and with my colleagues Melanie Wienens and Philip Schegner, we have been working on mapping ecosystem services values across the global ACP countries. And following the requests from Paul, the regional hub, and Nathan Conaby, Conservation International, we have been willing to contribute in the ecosystem service assessment for Timor-Leste. And we have developed a sort of new and different framework than the global approach. Framework that is based on merging and mixing stakeholders' perception and models or expert-driven information. Just a quick recall of why we are interested in valuing ecosystem services and why this is important in nature conservation. You all know that this has become a very important integrated aspect of the new global framework to value, maintain, and enhance nature contribution to people. And of course, when we think about mapping this contribution, it's also a way to make a case for nature conservation and of course for protected and other type of conserved areas, to evaluate how much of the benefits are coming from this site. So to see a protected site not only as a sink, but also as a source of benefit, and also to optimize planning of and management of protected areas, to identify trade-offs and mitigate potential trade-offs with other sectors, for example, economic sectors, and so to somehow integrate conservation and development. As I said, we mix two different approaches. The first one is participatory. Due to the COVID pandemic effect, we couldn't do the participation that we were aiming for, but we actually had two steps. So we ran a survey, on an online survey through our reference information system platform on the relative importance of ecosystem services. And then we involved the participants into another exercise that is identifying the relation between ecosystem services and biomes, which is described. So this metrics evaluation is described here. So experts and stakeholders attribute a value on a scale from 0 to 5 to the ecosystem services in each type of ecosystems or land cover, or let's say so a unit map. And this way it is possible then to map the value associated with each type of cover, ecosystems, or biome, whatever we take as a unitary map. And on the other hand, then we conducted a similar but different kind of different evaluation of the economic values of ecosystem service that is based on literature review. So there is a database of papers that evaluated the economic value of ecosystem service based on models or on prices, on different methodologies. And this global database allows for associating the value with different type of ecosystems or biomes. And that way, then it's possible to map the values. We actually aim for regionalization of these values because, of course, it's a coarse evaluation, takes into account all the different biomes across the globe. So we regionalize this database by providing, by attributing higher value to the papers, to the data, so the information that is coming from Timor-Leste directly or from the same geographical and bioclimatic area or from the globe. So in this case, you can see how the matrix looks like, the association between biomes and ecosystem services, and the colors are just showing, in this case, the weight of importance of the papers. So the higher the weight, the closer the study was carried on to Timor-Leste. There's only 2 studies that were carried on in the Timor-Leste in the database, while most of them, the yellow frames, are actually, so the values are coming from global data. Okay. So another very important aspect of this translation of ecosystem service value on to the maps is it was to transform to have a reference map, and we use as a reference the land cover Copernicus hotspot map for 2016 that we then translated into a biome map. This was done along with thanks to the contribution from the local experts, Conservation International, and taking into account also the national land cover map information, so to be able to match as much as possible the land cover types with biomes. And when we look at the distribution of protection of the different biomes, we can see in Timor-Leste terrestrial and economic exclusive zone, we can see that most of the area is actually occupied by open sea and ocean, but with a very low proportion of protection. And then the second most distributed biome is tropical forest, with a relatively higher share of protection, and then followed by cultivated areas and so on. This is just a slide on an overview of responses from stakeholders. We had 19 responses to the online survey and 5 responses for the matrix. And what we obtain is a matrix of value, so perceived values for ecosystem services with the global classification and biomes. And you can see that participants in our surveys, they expressed values for most of the combinations. And the darker the color, the higher the value. And we also see that for all the biomes, the food value is quite high. And there's also an attributed value to moderation of extreme events and raw materials, for example, of course, firewood, but also rock material for construction and timber. And there's also a high value for regulation of water, also air and soil properties. If we look at the same type of matrix of values, in this case now economic values, so dollars, basically for biomes and ecosystem service association, we see that from the literature we have some gaps in information. And there are some extremes. So we have high values for some services like food, water, and raw material, for example, associated with tropical forests. and also tourism in tropical forests, and the same for open sea and ocean, of course, tourism and also an attributed value according to the literature to waste treatment. Why there's generally lower values for other ecosystem services biome associations. But you also can see coastal systems with high attributed value for opportunities for tourism. This is, of course, it's coming from a global assessment. And if we look at the distribution of these values, we can see, for example, for the perceived value, again, tropical forest versus open sea and ocean, they have the higher share of the value, but while the share of the tropical forest is relatively good, the share of protection for open sea and ocean is quite low. And from the map, we can see that the distribution of high value for ecosystem services sometimes overlap with the distribution of protected areas. So the dark green and red dotted protected areas boundaries, but there's also other areas that hold high values for ecosystem services that are not currently in the protected area network. A similar view for monetary value, economic values, that the map is also reflecting what we were seeing before in the matrix with some kind of extreme, but a little bit of higher value here for the open sea and the ocean in terms of economic. And here you can see how much of that is protected or not. And it's, again, you can see the difference between the marine part, let's say, and the terrestrial one. And compared to what Paul was saying before, I think Timor-Leste has a different trend than the other countries in the region relative to terrestrial versus marine protection. And just to conclude, of course, this is these results are sort of not an ending point. There's a lot of biases, particularly in the sample, in the number of surveys that we had, but also in the relevant papers in the ecosystem services values database. So we have to consider this as a starting point for further investigation, but also for discussion and for prioritization and negotiation. So look at the map and see, okay, how much are we protecting of this potential economic value and perceived values? It's much less than what our coverage of a protected area is. So what else can we do? And what would be the cost of that? And also think about the importance of comparing the local expert and stakeholders' opinion versus something that is coming from a more general view on ecosystem services values. So it is very important to have a mixed approach and engage people, not only to integrate their knowledge, but also to raise their awareness on this topic. And what we are going to do next is also to try to use this information in a systematic conservation planning system that is called Marksan, so we can explore alternative prioritization scenarios, prioritization of both biodiversity information along with ecosystem services values, giving importance to maybe provision or regulation or cultural services. If you are curious about the ecosystem services value database, a colleague of mine is running a clinic this afternoon at 2:30. And yeah, so you can learn more about that. And if you have any question about this, just feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you for that very informative presentation. And lastly, Ananta Singh will join us to show us how the project has been able to deliver much needed funds to on-the-ground action in the region. So, Ananta.
Thank you, Lolita. All right. My name is Ananda. Thank you for the introduction, Lolita. I am the Regional Grants Officer at the Oceania Regional Office in Fiji. So as Lolita has mentioned, I'll just briefly provide a snapshot of the grant implementation in the region. So across the 15 ACP countries in the Pacific region, at least 10 of the countries have submitted at least one proposal to the calls that have been done. We have so far not received any proposals from 5 ACP countries, that is Niue, Nauru, RMI, FSM, and Tonga. These on-granting activities actually do provide much needed funding to some under-resourced organizations and ministries. So these funding actually do support activities on the ground that helps to strengthen the management effectiveness and the governance of the protected and conserved areas. Um, what we have also realized is that most of the grantees who have applied for the grant are not very familiar with the EU-funded projects, so they do actually require substantial support during both the proposal and the reporting stage. The most common applicants we have are from the government agencies and national NGOs. Unfortunately, we have so far not received any applications from community-based organizations. Now we're focusing our efforts on encouraging capable grantees to apply regardless of the countries in the next call for proposal. So of course, COVID has actually impacted implementation of the projects. So this is just a brief snapshot of the countries we have funded so far. As you can see, some of the countries have actually received more than 2 grants at this point. So Fiji, Kiribati, and Solomon Islands are actually the greatest beneficiaries of the action component grants. Fiji itself is benefiting 3 grants. So that's one STGA, one RG, and one small technical grant for assessments. So Kiribati, Papua New Guinea, and Solomons, they are both benefiting from 2 grants each. And so that is one medium grant and one small technical grant for Kiribati. So this is just one organization who benefited from 2 of the grants. We have one medium grant and one rapid response grant for the Solomons Island. And we have one small technical grant and small technical grant for assessments for Papua New Guinea. Just in terms of the grant status and the supported projects in the region, as Paul mentioned earlier in his presentation, that we have around 9 countries that have been awarded with grants for about 2 million USD, and we have the breakdown of 2 medium grants, 7 small technical grants, 4 rapid response grant, and 3 small technical grant for assessments. In these countries this year alone, we have signed about 9 contracts. So the most common supported activities we have received in the proposals are, of course, purchases of equipments, vehicles, boats. A lot of assessments are being carried out, and most commonly is the MAT and the sub-assessments. And then we have the, of course, training activities and awareness workshops to advocate amongst the communities, amongst the staff members, the rangers, and about the benefits of the project itself. And we also have patrolling activities that is, of course, supported by the purchasers as well. Lastly, if you do have any questions regarding the grant implementation in the region, please feel free to write to Paul and I. Now I would like to pass over to Maureen to play a video testimonial from National Resources Development Foundation in Solomons Island, who is a rapid response grant recipient. Thank you.
Ford, Judge of Tetamay from Siribe tribe. I work as the tribal company's director and would have much privilege to say some updates or stories about Siribe protected area. Well, Siribe protected area, we have been working with partners for quite a while now. I think almost 10 plus years on conservation activities with the aim that we try to protect or use our resources or our forest wisely so that our future generation will benefit also. With that, we now declared in 2019 as the first terrestrial protected areas in the Solomon Islands. And also carry out some work on RED Plus readiness projects. Also carry out biodiversity surveys on the resources that we have in our forest. Building a rangers facility or rangers base or station in that protected area is very vital, important in our views, so that our rangers really present at the site and do monitorings and also other activities that we plan for them to do there. We started building houses, cut timbers, but with our capacity, with our financial capacity, we do not manage to really complete that. So with the present or BIOPAMA's present and approval of supporting us with funds, we are now ready to really complete our station with the funds that they provided for us. So with that, big thanks to the BIOPAMA for the first assistance we received, our OBM and the canoe, since that the site is far inland from Sasamunga we currently live, or we actually live. With a boat and OBM, it really provides a good means of transport or accessing the site by our tribe, or especially our rangers, who will really carry out monitoring works or effectively as we expect, because of the RED Plus readiness and also the protected areas status. We need to have people present at our sites up there at the protected area. And with that, big thanks to our partners in the Solomons, and also a big one goes to the BIOPAMA for assisting us with the full completion of our station, and also the OBM and the agent. So with the tribes view, we really appreciate and like to applaud our partner or our assistant from BIOPAMA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ananta. That was a good video. And now, without further ado, I would like to turn it over back to Paul again to continue on before we close. See that?
Yeah, thank you, Lolita. That brings our session to a close. So I wanted to thank everybody who is there in person at the pavilion in Marseille, but also everyone who is online. Thank you for joining our session. Lastly, I wanted to thank the speakers who so kindly presented the fantastic work associated with the BIOPAMA project. So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, whether that's virtually or in person. Stay safe and yeah, do reach out if you've got any questions about the regional implementation of the project. We'll be more than happy to answer those. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Did anybody have any questions? Okay, we're running over time, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Vi. Thank you, Ananta, Paul. And thank you, everybody who were able to
Thank
join
you,
us.
Lolita.
Thank
you,
you,
Christelle.
Claudia.
Good to see you. Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you, team.